Hey guys, this is Joe with the CreateAlong design team. Today I've got a tutorial for you from the Ethnic Patterns subscription box. First we're going to use the stencil in the box that's called Mandala number 4. We're going to be putting mica powders in a rainbow pattern into all of those openings. So put your stencil on some black clay and press it down really well with your acrylic roller. And we're going to start with a red in the center. And once you put it on, you want to burnish it on with your finger. Might take a couple layers to get a good color since you're burnishing. And when you burnish it, make sure you burnish it to where you push it over into the next opening, because you want it to blend over into the next color. So next we're going to do our orange, and then the yellow, the green, and on and on and on and on. Making sure once you get the powders into the openings, you burnish it, and then just keep repeating the same process over and over and over. The powders I used are from the Artisan Pigments. I didn't have enough from CreateAlong in all the colors, so I chose these pigment powders. They're really good. And once you get them all on, you have something like this. It's very pretty. And we'll pull our stencil off. And it is gorgeous. And what we want to do with this is we're going to crackle it. So because the tutorial is called Lovely Layers, I want to layer this. But first we want to make sure those powders are firmly set. So I'm going to burnish them on even more with a sheet of copy paper. And I did this a couple times. So we're going to add a medium thick layer of distress crackle paste or crackle paint onto this. Now this product is from Ranger, and you need to shake it very, very well. It needs to be mixed before you add it onto the surface. I think it comes in a much larger bottle. I'm not sure the larger bottle comes with a brush inside of it. The smaller bottle has one. If it does, this product, if it does dry up on you a little bit, you can add water if it's not too dry to get it reconstituted. But you just brush it on, and then you're going to need to let that set. The longer you let it sit and to let it dry, and the longer it sits, the more crackle, and the thicker it is, the more crackle you get. So just paint that on there, and then once it's on there all over, then you just set it aside to dry. I set mine aside for 8 hours. Okay, the next veneer we're going to do is just, these are actually meant to be bezels or pendants that you work with. I'm using them here as texture pieces. So I'm using a release. I used Armor All on here. I'm not sure if that was the best choice, but that's what I used. And I'm just continuing to use both this larger pendant piece and the smaller ones, and just pressing them into the clay. Just don't press them very hard because they will get stuck. And to get a surface of texture all over. There we go. And now what we want to do is I want to paint this with some patina paint. Now I have no idea what this brand is, but you can use whatever patina paint you have. What you want is like it says, a teal color, like a army green, or they call it a colonial green in this one, and then a metallic, a bronze or a copper, to create the metallic we're going for here. So you want to get, I'm using a sponge brush because I want to get down into those crevices. This paint that I'm using, it has some texture in it. I don't think it's sand, but it's got some sort of a texture in it, so that's why it's kind of hard to get in, to get out. So after I get that first layer on and get it all over my hands, I'm going to use a paper towel to get some of it back up. Not a whole lot, but just some of it. And then, because I want to leave what's down in the crevices. And then I'm going to use water to moisten it back up, because with this particular paint, you need it to be moist for the next layer to blend well, is what I found. So now I'm going to use that was the teal, now this is the colonial green. And this one, because the water's on there, you don't need as much. Plus, I don't really want it to be covered completely. I'm kind of splotching it on and letting the water kind of carry it around for me. And then after I get that on, I'm actually going to use my heat gun to dry it. And as you know, if you use a heat gun on clay, it is going to cure the surface of the clay. So just be aware of that. So use it sparingly. And if you have areas, I'm going to use a little bit more water here to move it around a bit. And if you have areas that you have more water on there than you want, you can use a paper towel to dab some up. Now this process is a personal preference kind of thing. You add some, take some away, add some, take some away. It's just, you go, there's no set pattern here. You just go with what your gut, go with what you think looks good. Now I'm going back to the one of the original colors and adding a little bit more because I thought it got a little dark, so I'm turning it down just a little bit. And now I'm going to the metallic color. Adding a little bit on. This one's got a lot of texture in it, this sand or whatever it's in it. So it's a little bit harder to get off my brush here. So I get it on. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water so you can have it moving around. And at this point, you're probably thinking, oh, what a mess. This looks awful. But you got to keep working with it, and it will look good. Now, just so you know, my camera's going to cut off here a little bit, but I kept working with it, and I also ended up adding some bronze, some gold, and some copper mica powder to it to make that texture pop out even more. Okay, here's our next texture. This time we're going to use the deco discs, and I'm using water as my release because these things have to have a release. And I'm just pushing that into the clay, into the crevices, and dabbing the water up. And I'm just using these two that are in more of a square pattern, and I'm using that kind of as a checkerboard pattern. I'm alternating them back and forth, and I'll use that all over the clay. And that's done. So now I'm going to be using some just regular old acrylic craft paint. And the colors I'm going to be using are a peach, a mauve, cool blue and it's called petunia purple. It's a little bit darker than a lavender. And once I get them into my palette, I will be adding some water into each one of them because I want the paint to have a more flowing consistency. Mix it up. And just paint it on in stripes. Just make sure that you're getting it into the crevices. Now, you do not have to, with this technique, you don't have to be super careful about getting it covering up all the black underneath. Actually, it actually looks better in my opinion if you don't. So you don't have to be hyper vigilant about that. So I did the peach, the mauve, the blue, and the purple. And I did that twice. Now you'll see when I go on with the technique further on, for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure why because it's the same name brand as the others, but my blue paint was more liquidy or less viscous, I guess, than the other three, and it reacted differently to what I'm going to be doing here. So if that bothers you, it did not me. I didn't bother me at all, but if it does you might want to keep that in mind and get paints that have the same viscosity. And finally, the last layer of purple. I'm going to add some water. Now you can see where the blue is moving a lot more than the others. I'm going to take some paper towels and I'm going to blot it mostly at the margins where the colors meet. This technique is a little bit more controlled than the last one. Still messy, but fun. Now I'm adding some heat to it. A little bit more water, more heat. Again, just as a another reminder, anytime you use heat on raw clay, it does cure the surface. So it looks like I'm using a lot, but I am being very careful to monitor how much I'm curing that top surface. I do want it to cure to a certain extent because I want this to look aged. So you'll see with the pieces when they're done, there is quite a bit of crackle going on, and that was intentional. Now I'm adding some white at the margins because I want to brighten this up a little bit. Add a little bit of contrast. And just like I said with the other veneer we did, this is all personal preference. I'm showing you the products and how I did it and how far I took it. If you don't want the white, you don't think it looked it took away from it in your opinion, don't use it. Now I'm going to make a mess and take a toothbrush and add splatters. This, I think, actually really added to it. This was probably what I think was the best part about the white, was the splatters. Now I just barely misted it with water because I wanted to add a little bit of more grunge to it. So I added some black chalk pastel, just brushing it over the top, or scraping some over the top. And I thought I needed to add the water to help it stick. So here are our veneers. Now you can see that one where I added the metallic mica powders that you didn't get to see earlier. And that one, it's starting to crackle right there along the edges, you can see. And I also, these were all done on black clay, as you know. I also did all of these techniques on white because I wanted to see if it looked any different. So I'll show you those here. Here's the mandala. It's been sitting for quite a while, so it's crackling quite nicely. Here is the patina. And here is the, I don't know what to call it, the grungy one. It turned out very well. And they made some beautiful jewelry. Here are my pieces. They look very ancient, I think. They look very ethnic, very ancient. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you would like to join along with us on this subscription box journey, please subscribe at CreateAlong.com.